coming up on Unwritten.
Sarah Webb doesn't exist. We're all one. We're all source energy. We went to a shaman in Mexico, and I had an out-of-body experience and feel like I experienced source energy directly as much as I could. We live in this 3D world of deny, distract, dissociate. Those are the 3Ds. Deny, distract, dissociate. And that everybody's wanting to improve themselves and they want to get better. But do they really know themselves? Have they really spent any time with themselves?
The person that you thought was the love of your life?
I was engaged to a man who cheated on me while I was sleeping in the next room. We're conscious of 0.04% of reality. 99.96% of everything that we're taking into our brains and our bodies is being processed by the subconscious. This throat chakra is the only place where we can produce at all times.
Before we jump into this episode, I just want to say most of you that are listening are either not subscribed yet or haven't followed me, or this may be your first time ever listening to this podcast. So if you like any of these podcasts and you haven't subscribed yet, please hit the subscribe button. It really helps the show, and it helps us invite more amazing guests that I want on, that I hope you guys want to listen to as well. And we can explore topics that matter. So if you find value in anything that we're doing, take 1 second and hit that subscribe button, or take 1 second and hit that follow button. It means the world. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Can you tell me who Sarah Webb really is, and what moments from your past have shaped who you are today and the passions that drive you today?
Wow, what a question. Thank you so much, Thomas, for having me on your show, first of all. I think I could speak for a couple of hours about that. You asked who I am really and how the passions... Tell me again. The passions of...
No. Who is Sarah Webb really? You could start with there, and then the moments that have shaped your past leading to who you are today.
Okay. Well, my pen died on that question, so I'm just going to wing it. Thomas, I'm going to go a little bit deeper here because I know you can handle it, and I think that your audience has an appetite for it. Sarah Webb doesn't exist. We're all one. We're all source energy. We're all made of the same alleged material. Whether or not it's real, we don't know, but Sarah Webb is my married name. I was born Sarah Thornhill. And when I changed my name a couple of years ago, as a result of the marriage and also a deep meditative experience that I had, because I was not going to take my ex-wife's name. But I was told in this meditative experience that my name is Sarah Webb now. And so I had it legally changed. I even dropped the H. I was born with an H on the end of Sarah. And it was just so clear that my name was now Sarah Webb after this really, it was like an enlightenment experience, an awakening, where I really felt this ubiquitous peace and this pervasive connectedness to everything that exists. And so because of that, and because of the name change and some resistance that some of my family, especially the people who named me, did not like me changing my name, I have really let go of a lot of that ego, and it's impossible to let go of the ego altogether until we really reach that heightened, enlightened state. But I am very convinced that we're all one, and that Sarah Webb is an apparition, if you will. But as I have embodied this physical form for 43 years, my ego self has definitely experienced some things that you could label as tragedy, some things that you could label as joy. What I know because of the work that I do is that everything is neutral. Everything is neutral. And it's all about the lens, the perspective that we choose to observe with. They say life is 20% skill set and 80% mindset. And I believe it, because quantum physics tells us, modern science tells us, that everything inside of an atom doesn't have a superposition until it's observed. It exists in possibility. And that's how you can have two eyewitnesses to the same scene and have two totally different perspectives, even though they were there in real time, because we are bringing our data. We're just walking computers. We're bringing our data that we've collected over our decades, most likely, and coloring the experience with that perspective. So what has happened to me that have, in the past, that has led me to where I am? I was raised in a very strict Southern Baptist culture in South Louisiana. I was in church every single day. I went to school there too. We went on Monday night for red beans and rice. I sang in the choir on Sunday nights. On Wednesdays, I was there for church for youth group. And I lived and breathed Christianity and was afraid to be my authentic self as a gay woman because of the rhetoric that I heard from the pulpit. And what I knew about homosexuality is that it was going to land me in a place that I didn't want to go. So even though I fully discovered, when I spread my wings and left my parents' house, I went to college and found the wonderful world of wine and women, because there was no alcohol in my house growing up. And boy, did I lean into all of that, although I remained in the closet. And even put myself, my friends knew, and I dated primarily women, called myself bisexual, not really wanting to fully step into it, but then went back squarely into the closet around 26, 27, married a man, my baby daddy, if you will. And my sperm donor is what I sometimes lovingly refer to him as. And, we were friends, and I really was excited about repressing all of my true feelings. And a few years before that, I had a potentially tragic experience, I suppose you could call it, where I was raped by 8 men, drugged and gang raped. And they did prop me up outside of the hotel where they took me from. And so I'm really grateful for that experience, because it has taught me a lot of things about myself and about humanity. I utilized alcohol to repress what happened and was not able to look at it or look at being gay. And so I got addicted to alcohol and recognized when I was pregnant with my only biological child that I wasn't able to be intimate, because I was sober for the first time in my life. I was not able to be intimate with my now ex-husband. So I started doing the work to rid alcohol from my life and came out of the closet and got a divorce and then got remarried to who I thought was the love of my life, my ex-wife. And even though I was a meditation coach and an inspirational speaker, when I got heartbroken as a result of the dissolution of that marriage, I was devastated for several weeks. And then I started really leaning into my spiritual practices, these ways of reprogramming the subconscious, and shifted my meditation coaching to serve my LGBTQIA plus community, and have found such liberation and beauty in working in this space. So thank you for the question, and I hope that wasn't too long-winded.
No, that's a lot. That's like your whole life in the blink of an eye. But the first thing I wanted to pick out of that is the name part. You said you started with your name, and so your birth name is Sarah Thornhill,
Thorn like on a rose, hill like not a mountain. Yep. Yeah.
I wanted to think like wild thornberries. I don't know. So and then you got married and you took your ex-wife's name, which was Webb. And then you just decided to take the H off and then keep the Webb part.
It was all wrapped into one. Yes. When I had this deep meditative experience, we went to a shaman in Mexico, and I had an out-of-body experience and feel like I experienced source energy directly as much as I could. And when I came back, one of the first things out of my mouth was, "My name is Sarah Webb." And I don't really know how that was transmitted, but in that space, there's not really words. It's just pictures and impressions. And being a very sensitive person, it was just so clear that this is my name. And so I immediately started going by that, and then went through the legal processes, because I hadn't taken my ex-husband's name as my last name. It was my middle name. And so I had to change first, middle, and last, and went through that process a couple of years ago. And by the time she wanted to get a divorce, it was like I had just changed over the passport, and there's so many things you've got to get switched over, and I was not about to go through all that again and find a place to live. And like my ex-wife and I were dissolving the marriage, so that was stressful enough. So I published a book in my name, and so I as a published author, I feel like I want to retain some arc of continuity there.
Is it the poetry one? Or?
Yes. My first foray into the world of publishing. I'm writing a second book. Mm-hmm. Say it again.
I like poetry. What's your second book going to be about?
It's titled Queer Hearts Break Harder.
Queer Hearts Break Harder. Yeah. I like the titles of your book. So I wanted to know why or how you started to let go of that ego side of you, and why you felt like you needed to move forward.
I don't know that I ever felt like I needed it. Meditation is the key to awakening. When I learned what enlightenment was, in fact, when I first heard the word enlightenment, I really didn't even know what it was, but I knew I wanted it. And so I started, how do I get this?
Yeah.
And I've learned a lot about the science behind why meditation works. But I always say we live in this 3D world of deny, distract, dissociate. Those are the 3Ds. Deny, distract, dissociate. And that everybody's wanting to improve themselves and they want to get better. But do they really know themselves? Have they really spent any time with themselves. And meditation is such a beautiful way to actually, I call it folding within, so that we can really get to know ourselves. And it's an iterative process. It's just like working out or saving money or eating healthy. You can't do it for a couple days a year and expect to have success. You've got to do it day in and day out, little by little. Yeah. So the quest for dissolving the ego wasn't really that. It was more just, I wanted less stress. I felt like if you're enlightened, you're not going to be stressed.
I always tell that to people. I always say, like, because you'll come across people that, like, you walk around eggshells, right? And you can't say certain things around them because they get triggered or they blow up. And then they say, oh, like that was in the past, I'm over it. But then why are you so, like, riled up right now? Because if you were truly at peace, that past moment you'd be healed from it. You wouldn't be triggered by it. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. That's the work I do. Oh, yeah. I have a lot to say about that. Where do you want to start?
So what do you do when somebody, I guess, has that issue? I personally think it's an awareness issue. Like, you're not in tune with yourself and the people around you and how you affect them. So you are holding on to the story that you're better, but you're really not better.
Awareness is always the first step. A lot of times people who think that they're better than others, it might be a facade. It might actually be covering up deep insecurity. And it's a projection of trying to inflate themselves when really they are hurting and very insecure on the inside and feel like this is the way. So the work that I do in answer to your question with all human beings, but especially in my queer community, is to help people rewrite the disempowering stories, the crippling core wounds that are continuing to replay in their lives. You see, between the ages of 0 and 7, we are in a meditative state. Literally, our brainwaves, we have 5 brainwave states. Maybe you know this, but I'll just demonstrate for your audience. If they're watching, they can watch my hands. But the lowest brainwave state is delta, very slow frequencies. And we're in this state during deep sleep, as well as from the age of 0 to 2. We're primarily in delta. That's why babies sleep so much. And then above delta is theta brainwaves. And this is also a stage of sleep. It's very deep meditation, also sometimes called hypnosis. We're very impressionable in this state. And we are in this state from 2 to around 7, 8 years old. This is why kids play so easily. Then say it again.
No, I think that's crazy because I have twin daughters that are 6 right now.
Yep.
So they're in that state right now.
Yeah, my daughter's 7. They're taking in everything as absolute fact. That's why they say they're just little sponges. But before the age of between 8 and 10 years old, we don't have the development of the prefrontal cortex, this area of the brain. They call it like the brain's CEO. It has the ability to
operations,
utilize logic. Yes, order of operations and things like that. So when we start developing a prefrontal cortex, it's a long process. It starts around 8 to 10, doesn't finish till 25, maybe even. Yeah. So this is our ability to not be so volatile. But between 2 and 7, 0 and 7, everything is fact. We're just taking in everything as absolute fact. Of course, the next ones up there are alpha. That's the first stage of sleep and most meditation. And then delta is where you and I are. We exist in this vibration where we're pretty conscious and sentient and aware. Gamma is super high processing. We can't remain there for very long. It's too taxing on the brain. So what I do is help people get into meditative states, recognize the bodily sensations that are coming up when they have triggers or when they're experiencing difficulties, especially heartbreak, and find these literal vibrations that exist subconsciously and unpack them so that we can rewrite them, because we've got programs that are running decades old, no matter how old you are, from 0 to 7, and even 7 to 14 a little bit. We're still in a more susceptible state, especially if it's repeated little t traumas, a really negative parent or some sort of a primary caregiver or significant caregiver, like a coach at school who does something. It can help or it can hinder. So it just depends on what's actually being rooted in. This is why some people end up with PTSD, post-traumatic stress. I believe that we can have post-traumatic growth. And there's evidence for that. Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun in the late 90s developed this concept of post-traumatic growth. And there have been scientific studies to prove that people, like, for example, the Boston Marathon bombing, if they can rise above it and see it for the value that it actually contains, it tends to allow us to heal more quickly. Instead of staying in a PTSD state, we get a PTG state, the post-traumatic growth state.
Well, because people have a tendency to focus on the negative of what happened, and it would be wrong of you to say, how can you grow from something like that? That was terrible. But I agree with you. I think certain traumatic experiences are big moments of wisdom and growth that if you stay in the trauma and you stay in the victimhood, you won't be able to learn and grow from it.
Yes, this is the work. I love having a good chin wag with somebody.
What?
Yeah.
What?
A good chin wag.
You're hilarious.
It's a British saying.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Do you have British heritage or no?
No, I've been on some podcasts and
some Brits.
Things so, yeah.
I guess that brings me to the quote you have. You have two quotes actually that I was reading that I really enjoyed reading. So the first one was, stop the downward spiral, learn to spin within, and revive your power. And then the second one is, every difficult moment or every difficulty is an opportunity to move into wisdom. What made you think of these deep, impactful quotes?
Well, stop the downward spiral, learn to spin within. That's my signature, where I just try to teach clients how to get out of a triggered space. And that involves turning the eyes around and focusing on the two things that you can control: your thoughts and your actions. Because whenever something is disturbing us out here in our environment, it's a signal that, if we're trying to point the finger, that's just going to remain. We're going to remain in victimhood because we got those three fingers pointing back. That's not saying we're to blame, but it's indicating where the work is to be done.
I never noticed that. I'm so sorry. I never noticed that. When you point somebody else, you really have these three
It's very disempowering. Yeah. And it takes our power away. And so that's why I've named my programs Revive Your Power, Power Within, because we are choosing to step out of victimhood and to focus on the two things that we can control, our thoughts and our actions, and learn to spin within so that we can unfold into our most authentic self so that we can really figure out what it is that we need and what some of these core wounds are. Those are the two biggest things. If you can know what your core wounds are, begin to reprogram them and know what your needs are, you're well on your way to being able to establish and uphold healthy boundaries and thereby have successful relationships.
So,
and then the other quote was, tell me the other quote.
Every difficulty is an opportunity to move into wisdom.
Yeah, I mean, it's a short form of basically what you said a few minutes ago, that when we decide that, oh yeah, this horrible thing happened, like a multi-man rape or being stuck in the closet, but like if we sit down and cry over it and perseverate over it, yeah, some of that is important for a certain amount of time, but it's always an opportunity. It's always a challenge that we can choose to take, or we can sit there in our own muck and allow it to consume us. The more empowering choice is to, of course, spin within, take our power back, and figure out the two things that we can control, because there's a certain way of looking at something that can benefit us. And that is the big, big work.
So how did you get back on your, as you said it, proverbial feet after the incident? And this happened in your early 20s?
I was 28.
Or late. Oh, okay. So like around my age. So yeah, how long did you, so that happened, and then you went towards the downward spiral, and you weren't spinning within, and you weren't with power in this moment of trauma and pain and just contemplating life and whatever. How did you finally, like, how long did that last, and then how long did it finally take you to get back on your proverbial that's hard to say, man, proverbial feet?
Metaphorical might be.
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
I shoved it down, Thomas. I did not deal with it. I just shoved it down and didn't look at it until I was pregnant and learned to meditate. I had been meditating somewhat, but I really hadn't developed a consistent practice because I hadn't really found the kind of meditation that worked for me. And now I do all kinds, but I finally found a meditation coach, a teacher who I was able, and I still have contact with them. You know, I can still go in for checkups if I need to, but they were able to teach me a very specific technique called TM, Transcendental Meditation, that you do for 20 minutes twice a day. You have a personal mantra that the teacher gives you. And that really allowed me to start that spinning within. And it started kind of little knocking there saying, hey, you remember this? You haven't looked at this. Because I didn't have the alcohol. I was pregnant. I was totally sober my entire pregnancy. And, you know, when you get quiet, things bubble up. Now, I wasn't super triggered or like reliving it or anything like that. But it was a message that there was something deeper to look at. And so then I leveraged meditation. I had my baby and, you know, but then after things were stable, because having a baby destabilizes everything. After things were stable, I started using meditation in order to ask the question, like, who could I call that might give me a recommendation for somebody that can help me with this? How can I begin to unpack this? So that's what I did. And it took until, I was 40 years old before I really, it was a good 12 years before I really was able to start to do the big work. So unfortunately, it lay dormant, but I believe it's all divine, and the timing was perfect. It was exactly what I needed in order to be able to be old enough to actually handle what happened.
Yeah, I think sometimes time does help. It helps process certain things that lie dormant. And then, so you finally started to heal from that a decade later. And everyone's different. Like I feel like you can't rush it, right? You can't rush healing. You can't say like, I just like want this to be done with, you know? So I think you have to have that mindset as well going into healing. Like you can't just expect it to be gone tomorrow, especially if it's something traumatic. And then you were divorced twice.
Yes.
And was it the same person twice, or no? It was two different people.
No, I was married to my ex-husband, and then I got remarried after I came out to a woman who I thought was the love of my life. I thought this was my forever person. And, I wish that I could have finished the healing process, because we really started a lot of deep healing together. But I used to tell a silly story or a disempowering story about her giving up. And I have rewritten that. I see so much value in what I learned from that relationship. And I know that everything is happening for me if that's how I choose to look at it.
So what's the new story about that? Instead of her giving up, what is it now?
She is the reason why I'm in this space where I am, why I'm serving my community. And this has been the most meaningful and liberating and just beautiful unfolding. I know this is my dharma. I know this is where I'm supposed to be in this lifetime, and serving my queer community, because I do believe queer hearts break harder. Of course, hearts are hearts.
Is that a bias?
Hearts are hearts. It's a catchy way of highlighting the fact that we are at a disadvantage. And unless you've had the queer experience, we are a minority, no matter what. And so I'm a woman and I'm a queer person, and I don't come across to most people as gay. And so I'm constantly coming out of the closet. And I had a woman, I was at the playground with my daughter a few weeks ago, and she kept on talking about like, oh, guys she was dating. And I just said, well, I don't have that problem because I'm gay. And she literally stopped talking to me and walked away, called her daughter away from my daughter.
Oh, wow.
So either we're in the closet and we're heartbroken because we're breaking our own hearts, we're abandoning ourselves, or we're out of the closet and we're dealing with these microaggressions or macro aggressions.
Oh, yeah.
My birth parents changed the subject when I say anything about being gay, refused to come to my wedding, celebrated when I was getting a divorce from her, thought that I was going to not be gay anymore.
Oh, wow.
And unless you have that experience, it's like, so for example, I'm going to be presenting in this magazine, and they sent over the media kit, and it said something about, between a man and a woman. And I had to email the editor back and say, are you sure that my submission is going to be welcome here? Because I see this verbiage, this language. And it's just something that no one can understand unless they experience it firsthand. And so that's why I say Queer Hearts Break Harder. And that's why I'm starting my own podcast called Queer Hearts Break Harder. Not because our hearts are different, but because our experience is different.
No, I say the same thing about being a parent. Like,
yeah, you can't understand.
Yeah, like I'm the youngest of four. My brother is also part of I he doesn't say he's part of the gay community. He's just a gay man in his late 30s, and he always says he's not a part of it because he's very conservative and traditional values. So it's like he's like, yeah, I'm not liberal, I'm not woke, I'm not any of that. So he even says like that sets him apart, like a minority within the minority, because I guess according to him, he says most people that he comes across in the gay community are part of that whatever, like, community, whatever,
More
like,
liberal.
yeah. So yeah, I understand completely, and the same thing. But he came out by accident in his almost like 15 years ago when he was in the Navy, because we both did a tour in the Navy, and he came home one. Nobody knew. Like, we all thought he was a straight. He's kind of like how you describe. Like, people first see you, you're not flamboyantly gay. You don't have different haircuts and whatever to make you look a certain way. He's the same way, and yeah, he came home after being in the Navy for some time on vacation, and he had his laptop open for some, I don't know, and my mom was going through it, and he had like, I guess, gay messages going back and forth and pictures, and that's how she found out. And it was crazy because we also grew up going to church. We weren't that strict. We didn't go every single day, but we went every Sunday. And oh, you're the devil if you're with the same sex. Like, that's just not how it's supposed to be. And yeah, I completely understand.
Yeah. Similar experiences.
Yeah.
I will say, to your first point about, it sounds like he feels a little bit excluded, or like he doesn't belong, doesn't fit in. I think that the culture has changed some in our community, because I know several people firsthand, like personally, who are very conservative and gay. So I think that they used to kind of naturally go together because it wasn't so accepted, but because of the work that we've been doing for the past few decades with Pride, there is more of a departure now.
Oh, it's Pride Month too. That's crazy that I have you on specifically for Pride Month.
It's been a busy podcast month for me. Yes.
Oh, really? Okay, so my next question was, what made you, I guess, let go of whatever stories you had about coming out of the closet? Like what, like how did you finally, because it seems like this was a huge part of your life and it took a lot for you to finally just, it seems like you just set it free and you're just liberated from whatever stories about being in the closet that you were holding on to. What made you finally be okay with who you are, being a part of the gay community, whatever?
It definitely has to do with self-love, self-acceptance. So much of that journey of finding myself and stepping into my authenticity is tied up in figuring out that I had some really negative self-talk between my ears. Because I had been meditating for a couple of years. I started meditating 20 minutes twice a day, at least in 2016. In 2019, when I was getting a divorce and just changing my life completely, coming out of the closet and all that, I noticed that I would pass a mirror and inside my head, I would say, I hate you. And I don't even use that word now. The H word, I use all kinds of other 4-letter words, but the H word is not part of my vocabulary because I know about the reticular activating system and how repetition and emotion will program us. And so if we're saying H word to something that we don't want, it's just going to further reinforce that thing.
Especially out loud. There's like other studies that say like when you say it out loud, it makes it even more powerful or something.
Oh yeah, you're producing a literal vibration from the only part of your body that you can produce a vibration that you can create at will. This throat chakra is the only place where we can produce at all times. And I do mantra meditation out loud. And when you utilize these vibrations in a repetitive way, it's incredibly powerful what it does to your physiology and to your mental state. I highly recommend it if you're into deep meditative experience. Do you chant?
I do sometimes. I do I always do guided ones. I always do, because it's like I don't want to say weird. I just don't have the skill set to do it, or I haven't been taught myself to do it by myself. Like just I mean, I do like hums, like that.
Okay, that's a start.
Yeah.
That's a start. Yeah, that's gonna be powerful. I mean, it's basically Om with mouth closed.
Yeah.
And if you want to learn how to do it on your own, I can teach you because it's such a conundrum or a blessing, I suppose, because I have never liked guided meditation. I like to be in control of it. And apparently it's one of my gifts. Like my clients absolutely love my guided meditations and I lead them all the time. And it's something about my voice.
Podcast.
Say it again.
You should do them in your podcast.
I do. We meditate to start, actually. And then I'm doing solo episodes too.
Yeah, there's something about certain voices that are just, they like put you in a state of relaxation.
I agree with you. And that has to do with the frequency, the hertz, the connection there. Everything is vibrating.
So now you're okay with coming out of the closet?
I come out all the time if I feel safe.
Okay.
Sometimes I don't want to walk hand in hand with a girl because I don't feel safe. And that's picking up on those vibrations that we can't see that I heard you talk about in another podcast episode. Yeah, it's just, I'll give you the data, the science behind why. So we have access to billions of bits of data every second, billions with a B. And the human brain and body take in around 11 million bits per second. So it doesn't matter where you are, billions of bits of data, human brain is processing, and the body around 11 million bits per second. But we're only conscious of about 45 bits per second, between 40 and 50 bits per second. So I did the math, and we're conscious of 0.04% of reality. 99.96% of everything that we're taking into our brains and our bodies is being processed by the subconscious. And that's how we get those felt senses where we're just not really sure what it is. We're not consciously aware, but something feels off, that it's enough to bring into our consciousness, just enough. And then our logic, our prefrontal cortex is like, it's fine, you're safe. But when you go against that intuitive nudge, well, I'll just speak for myself. When I go against that intuitive nudge, it is never something that I want to lean into. I should have listened to my body.
Especially when getting into relationships, right? Sometimes those red flags are not necessarily like, it may not be like what they're saying or whatever. It may just be that vibe you're talking about. Like, you may just get this vibe that is a red flag in itself.
Well, and specific to relationships, actually, there might be something there. It depends. I don't know exactly what the situation you're talking about, but there might be something there that's a subconscious pattern from childhood that we can choose to look at from this vibrational higher perspective and to unpack it, because we are energetically attracted to. It's like I always say, I married my dad twice in 2 different meat suits.
Yeah.
Just different aspects of him. And we are energetically, vibrationally attracted to these people who I believe are here to help us heal these core wounds so that we can experience life differently. So yes, there are some times where we get this intuitive nudge and we're like, this is not right. I need to step away from this. But a lot of times we'll get into relationships. We feel like this is totally different person. So amazing. I'm so in love. And then you have to do the real work, because then things start to surface.
So you dealt with
that was a heavy sigh, Thomas. Is there something there?
Well, no, because it just brought up like when I felt heartbreak and reflecting back on the past of like the beginning of the relationship, seeing red flags, ignoring them, and then just going through the motions, whatever. But you had to deal with heartbreak from the person that you thought was the love of your life. Was that who you felt heartbreak from?
Yeah, I mean, heartbreak started early for me.
But like the deep, like the most impactful one.
The worst was from my ex-wife, and paradoxically, I healed the fastest from that one. When I was 30, I was engaged to a man who cheated on me while I was sleeping in the next room. That was a heartbreak that I didn't really deal with properly. I got him out of my life, and of course, like, we were supposed to be moving to a different city together so that he could go back to school so I could support him. Thank goodness. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Thank goodness 2 weeks before we were supposed to move, that happened. So I'm really grateful that I was able to dodge that bullet. Of course, there was alcohol involved, and, lots of excuses, but
toxicity.
That's not okay with me. So I am very grateful for that heartbreak. And then it was a heartbreak when I got a divorce from my ex-husband, even though it was my decision. When you get into relationships, any relationship, business relationships, friendships, especially romantic relationships, we have this language, this shared contract of language. And we say something like, for example, I'm going to make all the money and you stay home with the kids. Simple statement. Seems like it's really clear. But the person who's saying the statement, who's saying, I'm going to make all the money, they have their own set of data and they have their own idea about what that really looks like on a day-to-day basis. And the other person who's going to have the kids and stay home with them also has their own set of data. And we're perceiving that we understand.
They don't always align. Yeah.
They don't always align. Yes. So it's really important to be able to have those conversations that are more granular. But even then, even if you make promises that, you know, I'm going to not blame you for the way that I feel, for example, this is the promise I've made in a past relationship. I'm not going to point the finger. I'm going to realize, you know, I can talk to you about how I feel and stand up for myself in that way, advocate for myself, but not get into a sparring match over something that I think you've done to me. And we can have those conversations and say those things. And then we get into the situation and we're triggered AF and boom, everything hits the ceiling. We're not able to actually uphold the standards that we've set because of being in that triggered space where we go straight into fight or flight. We're in the limbic brain. We are not able to even hear positive tones. We are on high alert. Everything is crashing and we're going to go straight into subconscious and say and do things that are not in line with our values, that don't represent who we are at the core, but they are protectionary, they are reactionary, and they usually help us to end up in a whole heap of pain. So I teach all my clients a very specific technique called the power technique. I wouldn't have time to explain it here. So that when they're in those moments, they can actually learn to rise above the situation and see themselves from a different perspective. And we do it as an iterative process where they actually like take a real experience that they've had in the past and we do a meditation around that. And then I do the direct teaching and then we do another meditation where they can actually root in how to put this into their lives, how to implement it day by day. And we use certain elements of the power technique in the larger, this folding within process so that we can unfold into our greatest authenticity and really figure out who we are and what we need and what happened and why are we allowing that to perpetuate in daily life and continuing to lean into these stories that are just disempowering and are not allowing us to unfold into our greatest, most authentic state.
Yeah, because I think in a lot of relationships, especially longer term ones, if you don't have a solid foundation in yourself, you could lose yourself in the relationship.
Yes.
And that's why I like your Instagram saying how to get over your ex and back to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we lose ourselves in our past relationships, and then especially if it was a long one, let's say 5 or more years, you don't know how to be by yourself anymore. So now you have to learn. Now you have to relearn how to be by yourself.
Yes.
And it's uncomfortable. And then all of these questions and contemplations pop up that you have to reflect and grow and learn from if you choose to.
If you choose the red pill, right? But most of the world is asleep and Netflix and chilling. Not that there's anything wrong with Netflix and chilling, but like I said, this 3D world of deny, distract, dissociate, it's so easy. And meditation is so simple, but it's not easy.
What made you decide to, I guess, like, because you grew up from very, like, Christian. Do you still consider yourself Christian or what?
Oneness.
Oneness.
I believe that like I said, language is this shared construct, and traditions and people and cultures across millennia have given names and faces to this energy of oneness. You know, the Hindus had gods and goddesses, so did the Greeks and the Romans. The monotheism has different names for God. And it's just a recognition that it's not just us. And even people who believe in science and think that on some level that is true. This vessel is going to return to dust. But we know from science that the visible spectrum that we see in is just a tiny little sliver of what's actually going on. Mm-hmm. You know, we don't see all the other dimensions that quantum physics postulates. So, yeah, I went to Catholic high school after being raised in a very Protestant church. And so when I went to a Protestant college, I started going to the library because the internet was not a thing back then. I mean, it was, but it wasn't readily available. So I started going to the library and researching the religions of the world because I didn't have access to any of that stuff. Even though it was a Protestant college, they still had a lot of information about it. And I started doing my own research. And I saw at the age of 18 this ubiquitous interweb. And I actually became an atheist for several years, just thinking that, yeah, they're all too similar, so I'm just going to reject them all. And I did absolutely, yes, you did. You did something similar.
Yeah, like I was telling people I don't believe in anything. I'm an atheist. Now I'm different.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So when you would say there is no God, did you have a visceral experience? Personally, every time I would say there is no God, I would feel in my solar plexus it wasn't pain, but it was like, are you sure about that? It's like I knew as the words exited my mouth that it wasn't true.
It didn't feel right.
Yeah, literally didn't feel right.
And now, today, I think on I have a similar thought process of what you just said, that there may be a higher consciousness. I like to call it the collective consciousness, and the different religions of the world they are just different labels for that higher consciousness.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm with you there.
That's how I feel now. But let's get this game started. You ready for this game? Or do you have anything else to say before we move on? I think we covered a lot about your story. So it's completely random.
Okay.
Let's see. Yeah, you can skip it. There's some deep ones in here, some fun ones, and some kinky ones in here. So you can skip the kinky ones. But you don't have to. Okay, so share something risky about I'm still feeling guilty about. So share something risky about something that you still feel guilty about.
Oh, so interesting. Last night, I sent a message to my sister at like 10:30 at night. I had been meditating, and there was this thing that kept on coming up in the past few weeks that I did when I was a kid. I'm older than her. I'm a couple 3 years older than her. And I just was under the impression that I needed to reach out to her and apologize, because when I don't remember how old we were, under 10, both of us were under 10. And we were in the backseat of the car, And I stuck my tongue out at her, and she reacted, and my mom asked what happened. And I lied and said that she stuck her tongue out at me. And I don't know what her punishment was, but I don't think I've ever apologized for that. So I sent her a note saying, I am so sorry. It was a voice note, that has just been weighing on me. And I don't remember I don't know if you remember it, but I've done a lot of healing and a lot of asking for forgiveness. Even if they've passed on, I do the Ho'oponopono prayer, and you're probably familiar with that. But this was just one of those lingering things that I really couldn't let it go.
I mean, I like to talk about forgiveness because for me, in a relationship, especially relationships, actually, especially somebody heartbreak, exactly what we were talking about. You don't want to forgive somebody, right? You betrayed me, you hurt me. How could I ever forgive you? Whatever. But I think forgiveness is really found within yourself. You forgive somebody to let go of whatever resentment, whatever these negative emotions that you felt. You do it for you, not for them. And that's another thing with closure as well. Mm-hmm. You have to learn to forgive to find closure within yourself, because sometimes, I always say, people, like, accidents happened. Somebody that you just got into an argument with that you love, but you got into a heated argument with, they could get into an accident and die tomorrow.
Yep.
And how are you going to get closure? You have to get closure within yourself, not, like, they don't have to be there. You could speak to them, like, just monologue, speak to them, say, I forgive you, whatever. But yeah, it's found within yourself.
I completely agree with you. Forgiveness is for you, not for the other person. I use the analogy in my coaching of, if you're driving in a car and somebody cuts you off and you allow yourself to get all worked up and spew at them verbally, allow the cortisol, the adrenaline to rush into your body, they may be totally unaware of what's going on with you physiologically. Likely they are an old lady or an old man, and they're in a rush, or they don't care, or they're on their way to see their wife give birth, and they're in a rush. And there's a number of different situations that person in that. I like the analogy of a car because it really shows the separateness. And so they say that holding on to anger is like drinking poison daily and expecting the other person to die. And that's how I feel about it.
I agree. I think all of those emotions are just exhausting to hold on to, So I try not to hold on to them too long.
Just let them go. Yeah. Let them pass through, huh?
Breathe through them. Do your meditations and breathe through them.
That's right. The breath does help.
So I want to ask you my final questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
First question is, what is your biggest regret?
I don't have regrets.
For those that don't have regrets, what is something you would regret on your deathbed?
I really don't spend a whole lot of time there. I wish for my daughter, that she had a sibling. And I am really glad that I did not have another child, because it would, I don't know, but I was not a happy pregnant person. and it was really tough to give birth. I did it without drugs, which was an experience in and of itself. Don't recommend it. But it was beautiful.
Did
And
you have a natural?
I did, yes, all natural at a birthing center with midwives and a doula, not a doctor. I did it all natural, and I was regretting it as I was in it because it was unlike anything I've ever experienced. I'm so grateful because, as you know, being a parent, it's an experience that no one can describe to you. I remember people like seeing my belly and talking to me, and they're like, "Oh, you really?" Oh, they're like, "She has no idea." And I'm so grateful because I get to have not only the experience of being a parent, but the experience of carrying a human being, creating a human being, building a human being, birthing a human being. It is something that not everyone has the ability to experience and not everyone chooses to experience. And so as a writer and speaker, I find it so empowering that I feel like, although I've never been a man in this lifetime, I feel like I have a wider breadth of experience than most humans can have, because I have this ability to actually experience what it's like to give birth. And I'm also really glad I didn't have another pregnancy. But I do wish for my daughter. She really would love a sibling, especially because she's younger, and would really like to be able to play more. You know, I'm the playmate, which is so fun. I love being the playmate. It can be hard when I'm trying to do dinner and play school. But you know, I think it's wonderful that your twins have each other.
Yeah,
even if
twins,
it changes. It's more like refereeing than parenting, right?
No, that's exactly what it is. It's like they're always fighting or bickering, but then they don't want to their timeout is to separate. Like, okay, you play in this room by yourself, and you play in this room by yourself, and then that's their timeout, and then they cry to come back to each other, but then they fight again. It's like a cycle. But I do want more as well. Yeah, just in my lifetime I want more as well.
That's beautiful. Well, you're out of the woods though. Like around 5 or 6, it really gets a lot easier. So the diaper fit up, and that's really tough. So you're out of the woods at this point.
I think after having twins, it'll be way easier to just have one, like at a time.
Oh yeah, for sure. Was that intentional or genetic or?
So it was genetic on the mom's side.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And they're like completely different too. So it's like we have 2 different daughters.
Oh wow, so it's 2 eggs.
Yeah, like one's taller, one's more like masculine energy, one's more like petite feminine energy. They like different things. They're completely different. Yeah.
What a cool experience. Well, even with twins that are biologically identical, they're totally different. I lived with twins when I was 19 years old and 20 and beyond that in college. And that was quite a cool experience.
Well, it's funny that you brought up that you had a natural birth, because I remember the twins' birth. There was somebody next door to us in the medical hospital that was giving a natural birth, and oh man, just lots of screams and regret. Like, can I have the needle now?
And then gets to a point where it's too late though.
Yeah. Why did you want to, I guess, what makes women want to have a natural?
That is a loaded question. I need to make sure I protect people.
Okay.
My former partner was not a great caretaker.
Mm.
I had a couple of non-elective and elective procedures previous to getting pregnant, and it was very trying to think about being a patient. So the way that the medical industry works in the United States, they induce you a few weeks early with Pitocin, which then will put the baby under stress, and they don't allow you to eat because then you're prepped for surgery, because OBGYNs are surgeons. And natural cesarean need is about 5%. And at the 2 local hospitals here that I had an opportunity, the cesarean rate was 35 and 40%. So the likelihood of me ending up as a patient was very high because of the measures that they take to basically get paid more money. If you are in an emergency cesarean because the baby's stressed because of the drug that they've given the mom, then they give you the epidural and you're prepped for surgery. And so I really, I also didn't want to have my muscles cut across, just the healing, and not being able, like at the time we were living in a townhome where like you park in the garage and then you walk upstairs, and I wouldn't have been able to walk upstairs myself, much less carry my baby. And then, the next level, it was like a 3-level townhome. And so I wanted to also, there's a certain amount of, they call it the flora and fauna. There's a certain amount of bacteria, good bacteria, that's in the vaginal canal, so that when the baby passes through, they're actually prepping their digestive system according to what the mother has. So when the baby's surgically removed, which is of course sometimes necessary, they're oftentimes at a disadvantage biologically as far as the biome goes in the gut. So that's my short version of why I wanted to do it naturally.
Did you get epidural or no?
Oh no, I was at a birthing center where that was
Completely.
impossible. Yeah, it was impossible.
Oh man. That's something that men will never experience that.
Yes, I don't think they could.
No, like we'll never understand, like truly understand. But my next question is, who or what has made the biggest impact in your life today?
My daughter has had the biggest impact on me. She really has, I believe in multiple lifetimes, and I have had the impression that she's been my mother in another lifetime. Mm-hmm. And there's just been some very specific pivotal moments where she has come out with something so profound as a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old. And I see the world differently, as I'm sure you understand. I see the world differently as a result of being a parent. Even while she was in utero, I started like really listening to the songs that I was like, what are they saying? and of course, a lot of that gets washed away. You realize that exposure is okay. And I try to expose her, within reason, to as much as possible while she still trusts me, because I know that there will come a time when she's 17, 18, maybe even 10, where I'm chopped liver and it's all about her friends.
They're not
and
gonna tell us anything. They're gonna keep secrets. And
yeah, I remember it. I remember that rift around 10 years old, where I was like, this woman does not, it was my mom, and I love our mom so much, but like, I'm just like, she doesn't get it. Like, for sure.
Yeah.
This is not, I am not going to tell her anything anymore,
Yeah.
ever again, because of some, really strong reaction that she had. And why won't I expose her to as much, because I was so sheltered. I didn't even know non-Christian music. Until I got my own vehicle, I couldn't listen to the radio. It was all Christian music and Christian influence. And so maybe I've swung the other way too far, because I mean, especially being a gay person, like I bring her to Pride and she says all kinds of things.
No, I think it's fine. I think when raising kids, it's like certain political narratives. Like I don't want them watching the certain news and just things like that. Like that'll sway their world views. I like to try to keep their views as I don't want to say traditional, but as natural as possible. Like there was one time I was just swiping through YouTube, like regular YouTube, and my daughter was right next to me, and I don't know how it popped up on my algorithm, but there was a man, was it a trans man? When you're a man, you're biological. You have was it X chromosome? You're biologically a man, but the man was, and he had a beard. He had like a 5 o'clock shadow, but then he had makeup on. I think he had fake boobs, and the first thing that popped up in my daughter's mind was like, ew, that's yucky. That's not a woman? Is that that's the first thing that naturally popped up in her mind, and just things like that. That's what I want to certain narratives that the news and media are trying to propaganda, stuff like that.
And so did you explain to her, like, what was your process there?
Yeah, I just said that's a man, that's not a woman. Yeah, that's it. Just that's a man, that's not a woman. That's all I said. I don't know, how do you feel about it? Because I'm still curious.
How do I feel about,
like if that happened to your daughter and she just randomly seen that, or at school or whatever?
I mean, obviously I didn't see the image, and so I can't speak to whether it was a trans woman or a transsexual or a cross-dresser. There's a lot of gray area there as far as, some people are just, they don't want to change, but they want to dress like a woman, and they want to have their 5 o'clock shadow, and they don't want to take hormones or anything. Personally, I can understand feeling like a different gender on the inside. I distinctly remember asking my mom, she was braiding my hair before school. I was 6 or 7 years old. And I said, can we change? And can I be a boy one day? And she completely brushed me off. But I just, I have a very masculine energy. I'm very female presenting, but absolutely have some of these inclinations for more masculine ways of being. And do I think I'm a trans man on the inside? Probably not. But at a different time, had I been born at a different time, maybe I would have been more open to that. I'm very comfortable being a lesbian and wearing the pants, if you will. But I believe that, some people just, if you look to the idea that I'm not sure you share or any of your listeners, this idea that this is just a meat suit and it's, us having a human experience, then then who knows what the gender of someone's soul is.
Okay.
I believe, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I hope it's okay to talk about this.
No, go
You
ahead.
stop
Go
me if
ahead.
it's not.
Yeah, go ahead.
I believe that God doesn't have a gender, that it's just genderless. I believe that most angels don't have genders. And that as we evolve spiritually, we get closer and closer toward not being, being more non-binary. And that's what some indigenous tribes, they call it the two-spirit. Trans people, gay people are promoted to the highest order of their religion because they are seen as having this ability to experience the duality of genders and to be able to understand people better. And some of the sort
I've never heard this side of this topic, which is very interesting. I've never. It makes sense though, like, because if you think about it, think about when we die, and we like, do we remember who we were before we died, and we just disperse into energy and consciousness, and then it's like you can't really assign that consciousness and energy a gender, right? It's like you can't like, no, that's just pure energy, and that makes sense. Yeah, it's very interesting. I've never heard that. I'm more enlightened now. But no, that's why I like to talk about these things, because it opens up my mind more and gets different perspectives. You ready for your next question? We have
I'm ready.
three more.
I'm ready with the buzzer.
What is one lesson that you had to learn the hard way?
Lesson that I had to learn the hard way. And my first inclination was just to be gay. Let me think of something different though. It's a good one. I think the only way to learn lessons is the hard way. I'm learning every day as a 43-year-old that there is so much wisdom in age. And I've always had a lot of respect for older people and have historically had friends who are much older than me. And now I'm getting to the age where I'm starting to have friends that are much younger than me who are also on a spiritual journey and more cerebral. But just the march of time and of aging, and how I used to hear people say, like, gosh, I'm 57 years old, but I feel like I'm 25. And I think that that's something I've really been seeing in the last 12 months or so of my life, is that when you're 7, you feel like you're 25. And when you're 77, you feel like you're 25. And this body just isn't serving in the same way. It's not functioning like we're like, oh, well, this is different. So I think aging is a really hard lesson. And it's such an iterative process, but can hit us rather quickly with an injury or just this extreme fatigue of, I'm like, gosh, how can I be so tired, but then so wired at the end of the day? And so I'm, trying to look at screen exposure and stuff like that, because our bodies end up kind of betraying us as we get older. So I think that's my big lesson that I'm still learning. And I can imagine it's only going to get more challenging.
Yeah, especially for me, like I guess for men that body build a lot, and you you feel like the older you get, like you'll get weaker. So I guess that's what I'm afraid of when I get older. Like I don't want to lose muscle or get too fat or whatever. But yeah, age, I think age, it really is just a number, because it's the mindset that you have. That's why you could be 70, but you still have a certain mindset from when you were younger.
I have a friend who's 60. I have a couple friends who are in their late 50s and one who's 60. I was talking to her yesterday, and she's trying to date, and she's like, these men are so old. You know, she's like, but they're my age, but they're just not on the same level. They're tired, and you know, she's never had kids and has really retained a lot of her youthful mindset. And conversely, I've met 25-year-olds who might as well be in a nursing home.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's a spectrum. But my next question is, what would you do if all the time and all the money was not an issue for you? You had all the time, all the money in the world. What would you be doing?
My 10-year goal is to have a healing center in Kauai, Hawaii. And I would start on that immediately. I have a mission to teach 28 million people to meditate. And I know that 10-year goal is part of it. But in the meantime, I'm working on one person at a time and teaching them how to spin within. But yeah, if time was not a factor, boy, I think I would fly, and money. I would fly right now to Kauai, Hawaii, and start looking, because I have had many meditative visions of this healing center that I know is part of my Dharma. I can see it so clearly. The ocean is here and the mountains are here, and I know what the finishes are, and I know about how, like, where the decks are. It's all inside of my head. And so I'm hosting retreats and working backwards to that one day. And of course, leading people in my own way virtually. But I think that physical space is going to allow my soul to kind of come home in some way. So
you're going to feel contented, I think, once you reach that.
Something like that.
More at peace.
Something like that.
Why specifically 28 million, and why do you think Kauai called to you?
28 is a significant number in my life and for gay people. I'll explain that in a moment, but I'll get to the second half. That why Kauai, I have lived there in other lifetimes. The energy there is palpable, and it's so raw and beautiful. And they call it like the untouched island or something. It's not the most, it's not the least developed, but it's one of the lesser developed islands in Hawaii. And
I lived in Big Island.
Say it again.
I lived on Big Island for.
You did?
Yeah.
I only visited Maui and Kauai, but I'd like to go back one day soon. 28 is the age that I was when I was raped. I got sober on December 28th. That's when I finally solidified it. And Stonewall happened on June 28th, 1969. So that is a pivotal number in pride history and civil rights history. And so I was impressed upon or kind of told one day that that's my number, and that's what I'm sticking to.
I believe in you.
I received this. Thank you. I received this.
My final question is, do you have any anything you'd like to share with the audience to leave them with?
Find your kind of meditation and do it consistently. It's the key to unlocking the real you.
Sarah Webb, thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much, Thomas. This has been a really enlightening conversation.
Same. Hope to do it again one day in Kauai in person.
Yeah, let's go.
Let's do it in person one in Kauai.
I'm so in.
The background is 4K theater quality background, and we'll do a healing session there.
I'm in. Sign me up.
Let's manifest it. All right.
Thank you again.